Um, well, Jerry is putting on his lavalier mic. All you have to do is clip that under your belt and attach to your lapel. Jerry is one of our, I wouldn't say he's one of our older members of ITB, but he's one of our first members. So after we set up the company in 2014, nucleus of 4 people, we began gradually adding onto that, and Jerry was the, I believe, the second one to join ITB after our initiation, and I think right behind David Chaston. He might have been just before you. Jerry has a long and distinguished background in the restaurant hospitality industry, a lot of experience with franchising companies. I guess one of longest tenure was with Gilbert Sullivan, who is also known as
Gilbert Robinson, is also known as Houlihan's.
Right, right. Jerry has also been a franchisee, and he has more recently been teaching at Kennesaw State. And about a year ago or so, wasn't it? Maybe a little bit more than a year, almost 2 years. Wow. Jerry went in to help one of our clients, a company called Sage. At that time, I think it was called Sage Gourmet Chefs or something or other. Yeah, personal chefs. And that's since changed the name a little bit. Jerry can tell you all about that. But Sage is a Atlanta-based startup that provides, I guess what we're calling nowadays the home meal replacement, where not exactly like Blue Apron and some of those other models. They prepare meals that are delivered to their customers at their homes that are refrigerated, and they can heat up later either as a main meal or take it to work or something or other. So Jerry, we'll take it from here and tell folks what you're doing.
Yeah. So, like Jim said, I am a member of ITB, and kind of to talk about how networks are really powerful. I was with ITB, I was teaching at Kennesaw State, I was doing a lot of things outside the industry. And excuse me. One day I get a phone call from a lady who was the CFO for a large restaurant chain, the Peasant Group, back in the 80s, 90s. And at a time that she was there, they were struggling and heading for bankruptcy, and they were selling off a bunch of restaurants, and I was running a company that would buy restaurants. And so we got caught up in negotiations and so forth. And I had met her, and she had met me, and we'd kind of followed each other. And so she had been hired in, also an ITB person, to be a CFO and put all of their books together. And she, they came in and made her an offer to stay as a permanent CFO, and she said no. She said, you can't afford a CFO right now, and you don't need one. What you really need is an operator, and let me give you the name of somebody. And that's how I got involved. And I went and met with them, and she gave them a couple of other names just to be fair. And they interviewed us all, and I ended up getting hired in. That lasted about 6 months, and they asked me to stay as chief operating officer. That lasted 3 months, and they asked me to stay as president and CEO. And so currently, I am the president and CEO of Sage Atlanta Chefs, a subsidiary of Tappet Labs. And it was born out of the brainchild of 2 Silicon Valley guys who'd been working in Silicon Valley. One was a programmer and head of programming for apps for Trulio, the real estate company. And the other one was director of their sales. and they got to be personal friends, and they decided that there was a space to be entered into in the food industry. And while they're incredibly smart people, none of their resumes had anything to do with their training or their employment. One had a degree in engineering from Rutgers. The other one had a bachelor's in economics from Wharton School of Business. And so they got together and decided that they were going to do that, and they moved here to Atlanta. And they started their business originally as a company called Real Meal. And Real Meal Delivery was a company where you could call up and you could give an order and they would deliver it to you like within an hour. And they made okay money, but the problem was they didn't see how that became to be scalable. So they decided to make a pivot. And that pivot was to what they called the personal chef business. However, what they pivoted to was had nothing to do with being a personal chef. I know I taught classes in it. I know people who do it for a living and who are members of the industry association, and what they're doing was not being a personal chef. They had a great story to tell, which they hadn't even begun to come close to completing. And the story went that we were building AI learning capacity within our site, and you come on and you order from us, and it learns over time what you like, and pretty soon you're getting recommendations from us of meals that you would enjoy. So that going forward, eventually you get to a place where all you have to do is click OK, and you take your order and you're done. But they hadn't even begun to start working on that. And 2 years into this project, they had burned in excess of $3 million. They had a staff of 56 people. Some of them are rock stars in Silicon Valley, like the former head of analytics for Dropbox. And when we laid them off, those guys were employed before sundown. They made a phone call back to Silicon Valley and they were on a plane the next day. The end. And incredibly nice guys, but had no business being there. And incredibly, the founders were incredibly nice guys, but knew nothing about the business that they were getting involved with. And one of the things that I have learned over time is that when people start businesses, they generally fail for one of two reasons. One is they have zero experience in what they're doing. And the other one is they're grossly underfinanced from the very beginning. And they managed to check both boxes. They knew nothing about what they were doing, and they were grossly underfunded because every time they did what they were trying to do, they ran out of money, and their founder had to go out and find more money, and about the time he found more money, it was gone by the time he had the bank account. And then he was back out where having to go do it again. So a couple of things that I found. One was because of their lack of experience, there was no structure. I have worked on 4 different startup projects like this. One of them was to be a franchisee of TGI Fridays for a high-end brand called Italiani's for their international partners. And they all end up with the same kinds of problems. So I'm going to discuss them with you, and feel free to ask questions and keep this a back and forth dialogue. Because when I was putting this together and thinking about it, the thing that I found was that my background is in the food service industry, but when I looked at it and talked to people about other industries, the principles are the same. The mistakes tend to be the same. When I say don't have any experience and underfinanced, that seems to be a story in any industry when people start things up. They had a terrible marketing problem because they didn't know who they were. In fact, I sat in a meeting once and I made the mistake of asking the question if I could get a copy of their business plan. And after about 20 minutes back and forth, discovered they didn't have one. So I said, okay, do you have a mission statement? No. Well, don't you think we should stop for a minute and work on those things so we can decide who we are and decide how they should go? And he said, Jerry, you know, if we were starting this from scratch again, we would need to do that. I could see that. However, in today's environment, that train has already left the station. And so it's a little late to be doing any of that now. We need to just operate the business. And I said, how do you operate the business without knowing who you are and having some kind of structure to it? And we went back and forth over this. And finally, to prove a point, I grabbed his most senior guy and I said, tell me why I should buy from Sage. Tell me why Sage is an important thing for me. Imagine I'm not connected to Sage in any way, shape, manner, or form. Why should I use Sage? Dead silence. I said, give me some of the benefits that Sage would offer me. Dead silence. And I turned back to the founder and I said, you know, if your head of marketing can't answer that question, that's a problem. And so we need to start talking about that for real. As we investigated more, we started looking at cost of goods sold. In the hospitality industry, cost of goods sold and labor is about 60% of your sales. It's true in all systems. It's just a function of how the business works. And so if you don't have those things buttoned up tight, you'll lose every time. So, because if you look at the rest of a hospitality restaurant P&L, most of it are things that you just can't, except for marketing, most of it are things you just can't change a lot. You cannot change the fact that you need pest elimination. You cannot change the fact that you need chemicals. You cannot change the fact that you have certain repairs and maintenance that have to be done. There are just certain things you cannot change. They just are. And so the most easily managed, that have the largest immediate impact on your profitability, are what they call prime costs, which are cost of goods sold and labor. So when I dug into it and found that they were running 140% cost of goods sold, 140% of their sales was going to cost of goods sold. And then their labor model was running about 98%. So if you think about that, that's about 250% of their sales is going to their prime costs. And they haven't even paid rent yet. What's that? Yes. And so, and there were just little things. Because they didn't know the business, I walked in on one day over a weekend, because the way their sales cycle works is Thursdays they get everybody's sales, Friday they start production, Saturday they continue production, and Sunday they deliver. So that Monday you have your meals for the week. So I went in one day into a kitchen that was designed to hold about 10 people, and they had literally 30 people in that kitchen. All hourly employees. Not making a huge amount of money. It wasn't tied up in the individual pay. It was just raw numbers of people. And then I went into the corporate office, And there were another 30 people of various and sundry backgrounds being paid. I think the lowest one was being paid $60,000 a year to do a job she had never done in her life. To do a job that it was her first real job out of college, for which her degree was theater. And she was part of the marketing team.
That probably hit funding without